Good morning. So who make up this kingdom? Who make it up? We know there's Jesus. So how about his followers? How do they fit in? Well, in Psalm 110 it talks about Jesus having to wait in verse 1. Waiting in heaven with his Father. He has a rod in his hand, an iron rod. And it also talks about him being priestly. So how does that apply? Well, it's to fight. The iron rod, or a sceptre, is a symbol of rulership, and it's mentioned in Ephesians 2. Well, it's not, but it mentions who it's attacking in Ephesians 2. It says, you used to live when you followed the ways of the world with the ruler of the kingdom of the air, the spirit who is now at work in those who are disobedient. Well, we know who that is. Let's have a look at the commentary. The ruler of the kingdom of the air is understood to be Satan. They believe that Satan and his spiritual forces inhabited the region between the earth and the sky. And then in verse 19 he says to the apostles, since you're no longer foreigners or aliens, but your fellow citizens and members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles, with Christ Jesus as the chief corner. Now in Revelation 2 it says that he, or Jesus, will shepherd the people with an iron rod. Now in Peter, the first Peter chapter 2, it says here about the cornerstone. It says Jesus is the chief cornerstone. He says, the stone that the builders rejected has become the chief cornerstone. And then in verse 9, he makes an interesting comment about the apostles. It says here, you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for special possession, who should declare abroad the excellencies of the one who took you out of the darkness and brought you into his wonderful light. This group are described also, so they're a special people, a chosen nation. And in Revelation 21 verse 2 it says, describing when the new heavens and the new earth begin, it says, I saw a holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride, adorned for her husband. A bride, so they're also called a bride, a holy nation, a chosen, a little flock and a bride. And in chapter 19 of Revelation, he says this, let us rejoice and be overjoyed and give him glory because the marriage of the Lamb, so there's Jesus again, has arrived with his wife. Verse 9, happy are those invited to the evening meal of the Lamb's marriage. And he tells me, so when's the marriage take place? Well, when Jesus takes full control with his rod, his sceptre, as king. And that's the day of judgment, the battle of Armageddon. So this kingdom becomes fully operational then. Then we find out when this happened in Matthew 24. He says here, verse 31, Matthew 25:31, when the Son of Man arrives in his glory and all the angels with him, he sits down on his glorious throne. The nations are gathered before him, and he will separate people from one another. So the political nations, the people of planet Earth, are being judged. Some are being made judged as sheep and others are goats. The king in verse 34 says, come, you who are blessed, who have called the sheep. And they say, well, when did we help you? Because he says, well, I was a stranger, you received me hospitably. They said, well, we didn't. You lived 2,000 years ago. He says, well, in verse 40, he says, in reply, the king says to them, truly, I say to you, the extent that you did it to one of these, my brothers, you did it to me. So again, the bride class, the brothers, the chosen nation. This identifies who they are, what they're doing. These are the notes, so if you pause the video. So we've identified The bridegroom, Jesus Christ. The marriage event, when it happens, which we'll look into more next week, we've identified the little flock, the chosen nation. They're a royal priesthood as well. We've identified these brothers. So there's these brothers, some are still alive today, who are going to be joining Jesus in heaven, in this heavenly kingdom, this new Jerusalem. I thank you once again.